Hello, this is Charles A. Archer, and welcome to our series, The Influencers, where we introduce you to people who in society are affecting change. Today we're going to have the opportunity to talk to Congressman Gregory Meeks. So welcome, Congressman.
Good to be with you, Charles.
I'm very happy that you had the opportunity to come and speak with us and just talk about things that I think are important to our audience, through Everybody Paddles, as well as to your community and all the things that you do. For those people who don't know who you are and what you do and all the history of things that you have done in the community, why don't you tell our audience who you are and what you're about?
Well, I'm Gregory Meeks. I should like to say I'm a little poor boy from southeastern Queens by way of East Harlem. I've been a member of Congress now in southeastern Queens, which also includes some of Nassau County, for the last 17 years. Prior to that, I was a member of the New York State Assembly and also the supervising judge of the workers' compensation system and a special narcotics assistant prosecutor, and assistant district attorney here in Queens County. A proud graduate of Howard Law School.
Everyone's proud of Howard.
The Law School of Justice Thurgood Marshall. But always involved in community. And the whole idea, even when I went to law school, my parents being the great motivators for me that they were and are, they always taught me, and they made great sacrifices, huge sacrifices. I'm a product of public housing. Huge sacrifices for me to get my education. But they said, and they had to pay, and I had to take out school loans. But all during that time, they said, we're not helping you get this degree just so that you can just focus only on you. Always remember who you are, and always remember where you came from, and always remember who helped get you there. And so I've always been involved in the community, trying to get individuals involved, whether it's with government, to make government work for them, with what we called at that time the Rockaway Peninsula Civic Association in Far Rockaway, Queens, or trying to make sure when I was in the district attorney's office that there was some interrelationship. So I'm one who believes as the President of the United States, community organizing is tremendously important to make a better America. And I think that's, in essence, is who I am and where I've come from.
It's impressive, and I must tell you, I've had the opportunity to see your experience from a distance, and it has definitely motivated myself and some of the other people that have went to law school and have done a lot of things. The Everybody Paddles movement, it's about creating cultures where people can be productive, where people matter, people can add value and contribute. So when you think about community and community organizing, as our president has often talked about, how important is it for people to add their own individual value?
It is absolutely essential. It is the way that we improve as a people and as a community. And everyone has something that they can add. Because when you think about each person's background and their way of life and their growing up, their experiences, it gives and it makes a contribution to the whole. I just, before we were beginning our little dialogue here, come from a event with the Jamaica Y, and they had a cross section of individuals, especially young people, who are looking for someone to embrace them and to give them some mentorship. They would love to hear about the various life opportunities and how individuals were raised and where they came from, because it inspires them and it opens up their eyes to opportunities that they might not have known previously. So by people participating in local communities, whether it's on a tenant association, a block association, getting organized and working collectively together, it makes a difference. It makes a difference for those who have, but especially for those who don't have.
So when I think about the part you talk about with young people, I too am a product of Red Hook Projects in Brooklyn, New York. I too understand the importance of what my contribution has to be beyond my life and my family. However, so often here in this city, in Queens and in other parts of New York City, we don't hear about the contributions of those who do contribute. We often hear about those who don't, who don't add value, who don't do anything? How can we look at the segment of our population, our communities, that seem somewhat disenfranchised or uninvolved, and get them more involved in what we're trying to do throughout New York and throughout the country?
I think that the first thing, Charles, that we need to do is what you're doing, is focus on some of the organizations and the people who are in the communities who are organizing, as opposed to talking about just the negative. Let's look at those positive. We've got a number of organizations here in southeastern Queens, for example, who are working on a daily basis, whether it's with public housing or anti-violence programs or mediation, individuals who are never really heralded or talked about. If we focused on those programs and the successes of those programs, I think that would drive and inspire others to either get involved in those programs or create their own. Right. Because they then, too, would say, I can make a difference because I see a difference, and I see organizations that are making a difference. And it then improves. We often talk about networking. Well, networking is not just for individuals to have a cocktail somewhere, with all professionals. That's not just that network. You have community networking, right, where you can go into a local community and network and talk and work with folks. The president talks about my brother's keeper. That's something that is important. We have an organization here in New York, and now it's national, 100 Black Men, and that's about mentorship. And so, there's also programs locally. We have a young lady by the name of Erica Ford who runs the Life Camp, I Love My Life, and she tries to deal with mediation of incidents and try to prevent incidents from happening and talk to some of the gang members and others in the community. So if we could highlight programs like that, it will show success, and I think it would inspire other individuals to either be involved in that organization or similar organizations, and or to create their own, that they do have a role and can play a tremendous part in the upliftment of community by organizing. And I think it makes a difference in the lives, especially of some young people, but also of others, because some need parental skills and things of that nature. And so it brings in a whole host of issues and organizational needs that the community has, and shows that who's trying to fill the gap, so to speak, who's stepping into the gap.
20 years ago, I co-founded Evelyn Douglas Center for Serving People in Need, where we support people with mental retardation and other developmental disabilities. And as a community organizer, I know the importance of the fact that here in Queens, we have about 200 people that we've actually employed. How can we create more opportunities for people to become their own business owners, especially supporting mid-sized and smaller businesses, not just in capital, but in administrative support, which actually allows longevity?
Well, there's a couple of things that we're doing here at Queens. Over at York College, for example, with the there's an SBA program, Small Business Administration program, that is at York College. And I know from my office, we often refer individuals who are looking to create and start their own business who don't understand the administrative aspects of running a business. And they get the help and the tutorage that's necessary to say, this is what you need to do, to run your business. Here's, and they give them a blueprint of how to go about doing it, how to get the financing that's necessary, how to make sure that you are balancing your books so that you know where the revenue is coming in and where the revenue is going out, which is tremendously important. Some even how to do the pricing, because folks don't know how to do pricing sometimes. So that's one of the areas of which we look, and we also have at the Greater Jamaica Development Corporation, another not-for-profit, where they do certain and have certain activities for folks who are looking to do get into their own business. And then, one of the things I try to do on a federal level, which is important, and I think is opportunities for us to really be, what I say, in the engine as opposed to on the caboose. When you look at, especially in New York City, the opportunity for us to export things all over the world. I'm a firm believer of build it in America and sell it elsewhere. Well, there's opportunities to do business globally. We live in a global economy, to think not just locally, but think globally and what those opportunities present itself and how your business can then make sure that you're getting out. And there's opportunities, for example, even for financing with the Ex-Im Bank, of which we're still working to get to reauthorize in Congress, but it's important, and they do a lot of work with small businesses. Or, where there are big corporations who are doing various things, but they need individuals or small businesses to give them supplies, to be, in regards to, you could sell them the supplies or that's necessary that they then ship over to someplace else so that you can be involved in, which is a huge part of the president's agenda of dealing with international trade, as opposed to us being afraid of it. Let's learn about it and therefore be the individuals that can be in the forefront of it. And I think we can benefit. There's great opportunity there that is largely going untapped. And we're trying to make sure by doing various events in the district locally and talking about it as I am with you,
right.
So that folks will call up and says, hey, I've got a business or a business idea, because the worst thing to do is to have an idea and not take advantage of it,
right.
or give it to someone else and they take advantage of it, and let's try to maximize that.
As you talk, there are two things that come to mind. One, when you look at employment and unemployment, I do personally believe that it's been the community organizing and the small businesses and not-for-profits that have really put people to work throughout the country, and they should definitely continue to be supported. The other thing that it lets me think about is when you think about the fact that other countries come here and benefit from doing business with us, but we have not taken full advantage of that opportunity to do business. So when I think about Everybody Paddles, there are two principles that come to mind, and we're going to switch, I guess, to the federal government, where I think you're doing a lot of work now as well. Principle 1 is about consensus, and principle 3 is about communication. So tell me why, please. Bipartisan, bipartisan, bipartisan. Why can't we get it together to some degree in Washington?
Well, if I had that answer, but believe me, there's a number of us that are trying.
Right.
I try to talk to some of my Republican colleagues all the time. And unfortunately, though, in the 17 years that I've been in Congress, I think we're in a worse place. We're in the worst place that we've ever been. What's happening is we are, especially on the Republican side, I believe, electing individuals who are ideologues, meaning that they do not want to compromise. I think our government has been successful for over the 238 years that it has been here, because the way it is set up is it focuses on compromise. But if you come with the idea that it's only going to be my way and no other way, and you're not going to have any input, and then it shuts down. And by and large, since President Obama has been president, that's what we've seen.
Right.
And it started, some people say, oh, his policy. It started even before he was able to articulate what his policies were. On day one, when he was inaugurated back in 2008, when you had the lead Republican senator say that his main objective was to make sure the president was not successful, it just shows you the trend of which they were moving in, and thereby trying to block many of the things just being obstacles as opposed to trying to figure out what we can agree with. Now, the challenge is, Charles, that as I see it today, for the Republicans is they have to ask themselves whether or not they want to do something or do nothing now that they are in charge in both the House and the Senate. Sometimes when you are in the minority party, and they were in the Senate for a while and for a brief time in the House also, then you just play politics. You're not looking at what your accomplishments are. You're trying to block certain things and just playing politics. But when you become in the majority, then you have the responsibility to govern and not just play politics. So they now, by virtue of being in charge of the House and in the Senate, they have the responsibility of governing with the president, which then should mean that if they want to accomplish something, they have to be a compromise to work with Democrats in both the House and the Senate and the President of the United States. As we saw, and I give an example, they were resistant of doing that fact when we were debating the Homeland Security bill. So they couldn't pass a bill simply with the Republican majority. If they wanted to do something collectively, they had to put something in that Democrats and Republicans could vote for, so that the right wing of the Republican Party, wouldn't control the overall good. And so the Speaker in that instance, so that the government or DHS, Department of Homeland Security, funding would continue, had to say that we've got to make sure we do the right thing and govern. And so he put a bill on the floor that both Democrats and Republicans could vote for. Otherwise, it would have shut down the way the government shut down previously. And so those are the kinds of decisions that we've got to look forward to see what takes place in the future. The unprecedented, what concerns me, I just saw just talked about an example of where we work together. What concerns me is when you had 48 Republicans write a letter to a foreign government, questioning the authority of the President of the United States. Now that's not governing. That's unprecedented, and it gives me deep concern about where we're headed as a Congress. So the jury is still out over the next 2 years as to whether or not some of my colleagues on the Republican side want to govern or just play politics.
I think about the Affordable Care Act that I know you supported when all of those things came up. Has that situation, not the Affordable Care Act, but all the other examples you've given, has that unified and had the Democratic Party find ways to work better together in order to not be in a position of just playing politics?
Well, I think that the Democratic Party is together, and to a large degree, it's becoming hard for the Republican Party to just say, just end the Affordable Care Act, because too many of their citizens and their districts, their constituents, are benefiting from the Affordable Care Act. And so when you listen to them now, you hear them often say, well, there's some good things in the Affordable Care Act, and we just need to figure out how we reform it so that we don't get rid of where your child, if they're under the age of 26 as opposed to 18, can stay on your health care, where that you get rid of, you can't get rid of a scenario where individuals who have pre-existing disease are not covered by the health insurance, where small businesses are now able to insure more of their people. And so you have had now over 10 million and growing, I think 12 million Americans who did not have health care before now have health care. And you see costs starting to come down. And so as the longer we get away from it, the harder it becomes for the Republicans to say, well, we're going to just abolish the Affordable Care Act. And it gets easier then, and I think on the Democratic side, we're united to fight for it, but it's easier then to look at areas where you can fix and make it even better when you know that the objective is not just to end it. You think about Medicare and Medicaid, nobody wants to end that. But there was strong opposition to it when it was put forth by Lyndon Johnson in the 60s. And we've made some amendments and changes, learning over time. And I think that's the same thing that's going to happen with the Affordable Care Act. And it has to then become less of a political calling card that the Republicans have utilized up to this point.
When I think about that, there's also the American with Disability Act and the recent amendments to it to make sure that people can get the access. There's the Voting Act that definitely has been talked about as well. There's immigration that, is also being addressed. What's going to happen with those issues?
Well, what we've got to do is to make sure, and that just shows you how each of those bills are huge, but as you just correctly stated, there's been amendments to it as we grow older, because we're trying to still become a more perfect, a better nation. Right. And so that's the same thing with the Affordable Care Act, et cetera. With the talking about the Disabilities Act, the ADA, we've got to make sure that there is strong compliance, and that what's on the books is being appropriately enforced. You know, we've come a long way, and I think there's no denying that. I can recall when you didn't have the sidewalks that were carved out so that individuals with wheelchairs can get across the street. In every federal building and most government buildings now, there is hearing aids for those that may have a hearing disability. You have bathrooms, and all has to be handicapped accessible. You now have in public transportation where the buses would have to kneel and individuals have to come in. You've had even the civil rights bill amended to make sure that people with disabilities are included therein. So we've got to then make sure that there's enforcement. For example, that how do you know whether there's housing discrimination for the disabled? And by the way, a lot of the disabled now are individuals who put their lives on the line in the military for us. But so how do you know unless you have groups and organizations and nonprofits who are constantly testing to see if, in fact, there's discrimination going on? I think we've got laws on the books, right. And now we've got to make sure that they're being complied with. And just looking recently and having been told recently, the number of complaints, especially with reference to housing right. Discrimination for the disabled and seniors, the number of reports and all across America is down to 27,000. That's nothing. And I've got to believe that we've got to figure out how we get more not-for-profit organizations to help to see. It just reminds me of a story. When I was in high school, actually, I was in a program called the Encampment for Citizenship. They took us away to Arizona, and we hooked up at that point with a not-for-profit on human rights. And no one was really talking about housing discrimination that much. But what we did there, we had we called on a phone because there was looked at the newspaper, saw that there was an apartment available, etc. There was someone with, actually at that point, a white voice that spoke and said, "Hey, we're calling about an apartment." I said, "Oh, yeah, sure, come on down." And then I was a role player. I came as a child of someone else, and we were now a black family that was reporting. They didn't, and so when they saw us, they said, "Oh, we just rented that room." And it was an eye-opening experience for me coming from New York and seeing this actually take place. And then as that not-for-profit was able then to put in an official complaint to the state of Arizona about discrimination that was taking place. We still need that today, right. And especially with those that are disabled and some of our seniors, and I think that's what we need to do.
When I think about, and I go back to immigration because I know it's a really hot topic, as a descendant of a Caribbean family from Barbados, in Queens where there's a huge Caribbean population, and Brooklyn where there's another big population throughout the city, how can we make those laws accessible where people are basically knocking on the door for an apartment and can't get in, or get in a manner that is conducive to the country but equally to the freedom that we provide here?
Well, it's frustrating. So frustrating for the President of the United States. He had to issue executive orders right. So that he could try to give individuals who are immigrants here a equal and fair shot. And we are a country that is made based upon immigration. But when you look at the makeup of this Congress and the direction of which they have been moving in, it is difficult. So when you ask me, how can we do it? Well, I tell individuals we do it at the election. We do it at election every 2 years or every 4 years for president, every 2 years for members of the House, and every 6 years for the U.S. senators. You've got to change the individuals who will get elected, and we've got to employ them to come out to vote. You oftentimes get the government that you ask for. And so, and when I say that is, you vote whether you go to the polls or whether you do not go to the polls. Right. And so the way that we can change the direction of which this country is going in where we want change is we need more people to go to the polls on every election day, and not just vote when only it's the president, but vote at every level. Another example is on a local level here in New York City, which I wish others. The people voted for a mayor who has a similar sentiment, and so he's trying to put in place what the federal government is not doing here in New York City with reference to immigration and make sure that immigrants have rights and they have, they're not being discriminated against, etc., which is, I think, is tremendously important. So the best way that I know to do it is to elect people that are of similar mind, and then, you see things happening.
I'll come back local for a brief moment. We've seen throughout the country the whole situation around police brutality. We recently have seen about a young man who was totally unarmed, running away from an officer and was shot. What do you think that we can do to partner with community organizers? I am a former assistant district attorney like yourself. I understand the importance of policing. I understand the importance of what they do and appreciation for it. But there's something wrong when these things are constantly happening, and there's a need for some people to speak up and address it. But how do we get to that point where civic leaders, community leaders, and the community and the police department are in some way discussing these things honestly to address them?
Look, if we're not ready to have that discussion, something is terribly wrong. And it's why we've got to stay focused and stay politically involved. It's the similar discussion that happened in the 60s.
Absolutely.
It was about Bull Connor and Sheriff Clark and the police departments that was committing the brutal acts against folks who were demonstrating peacefully. And there was a whole question of police brutality generally, especially in communities of color. Unfortunately, here we are 50 years or longer later, and we still have to have that. It's that discussion and that conversation because we have to change the atmosphere, the climate of which we are being and how we're being policed, especially communities of color. In New York, for example, I've had conversations with Mayor de Blasio and Police Commissioner Bratton recently, and they are doing, not only is there going to be a retraining, which is going to take a while to try to get a different mindset of how you do policing, but also there are some programs that we're going back to community policing because, where you have individual police officers on the beat, you don't have drive-by policing. Right. I think that makes a change because then everybody gets to know everyone, and that makes a difference in a city like New York City. Having the Justice Department do its practices and pattern investigations, as it did recently in Ferguson. And you've seen what happened in Ferguson with regards to some of the racist emails that was out that tells you what their climate was and how they thought about the community. So the Justice Department needs to continue to be involved and have that dialogue. And then recently, as took place in Ferguson, why elections do matter, they elected for the first time in their city council, you're going to have 3 individuals who are of color and who come from the community where they had not had that before. And so that also then helps have an impact on who's doing the policing and how the policing is done. So you have a mayor in New York who made sure he had a police commissioner that was sensitive to what was taking place. So you're trying to then change the way that police officers police because folks decided that made a difference to them. Right. So we've got to do that in various other communities. I am encouraged, by the way, about the speed of which the sheriff in the South Carolina incident said we are charging the police officer that did this shooting with murder. Right. To let them know that they're not going to, not going to let them get away with it. However, you have to say, if there was not someone with a phone camera to put this on record, that police officer would have gotten away with murder. If it wasn't for a phone camera, where we recently had a police officer talking to an immigrant who was driving in a car with a passenger in the back, berating him and really, talking down to him. If it wasn't for that, we would not have known that. And that takes place too often. And that's the kind of climate that too often takes place that the general public doesn't know unless you live in one of these communities,
Right.
or unless you're one of those immigrants, or unless you're one of those people of color.
There's a lot of things that are going on in the country, and I see that you're actively involved. So this is the point where we give you the opportunity to tell us what's next for Congressman Meeks and what's going on in your office and the things that you're pushing to kind of work through the issues within your community.
Well, we've touched on some. When you think of the 5th Congressional District, what's most important for individuals is the economic revitalization of the community and job creation. And so we're looking at ways that use downtown Jamaica and Far Rockaway and parts of Elmont, which is in the district in Nassau County, that we can economically revitalize it by attracting small and medium-sized businesses or give individuals that opportunity to run those businesses, because then you're creating jobs for folks, which is tremendously important. So we're doing that now. We're looking at, we have over by the Long Island Railroad, for example, a development that is housing as well as retail, which will make a difference for people to live as well as create jobs, and utilizing the airport that's necessary. We're looking at by the Belmont Racetrack over in Elmont, at what kind of development can be done, because there's a vast property there. And when you look at what takes place with the Preakness and the Kentucky Derby, it's huge economic development that happens in those communities. How can we make sure that Belmont now is not just a one-time event for a few folks to come in where the community gets no benefit?
Right.
How can we develop and make a difference there? So that's what part of what we focused on locally. And the same, and similarly in Far Rockaway, which had been a forgotten land for a long period of time, how we can create housing and affordable housing, because that's another big focus. We, just coming out of the greatest recession since the Great Depression, this district was hit with the largest foreclosure rates, downtown Jamaica, Far Rockaway, where there was tremendous loss of wealth for folks in this community, and people lost their homes. So we've got to look again to see how we can help individuals from going into foreclosure, help those that went into foreclosure to be able to get back into a home and or rent again. So we're focused on the foreclosure disaster and to see how we can give people a hand up in that regards, so that they can get back on their feet and move forward. So, those areas. And then, of course, you never stop, and we've got to fix and work collectively on our educational system. That is the key to the future for today and tomorrow.
Right.
And so we're working very closely, and I work on both levels. I work with, public charter schools, but we can't just stop there. We've got to work with all of our schools and try to figure out a formula that works. I think that, what we're looking at now, we've adopted certain schools in the area because we need schools, especially in the communities of lower income, that treat the whole student, and so we're trying to figure out how we can get certain things funded like that, not only through the charter schools, which I think by and large, the ones that we have here, like, for example, the Eagle Academy that the 100 black men are running, if that's successful, how do we do that in other schools so that they can be successful also, and not just those that, because what we find is parent involvement is absolutely essential. And so those parents that are involved in their lives, they're going to try to make sure that their kid's name is at least in the hat to be pulled out of the lottery.
Exactly.
But what do we do with the kids whose parents are not as involved, so their kid's name never gets in the hat, so they can be pulled out, so they can go to some of these exemplary schools, is we've got to have these whole schools so that we can deal. That shows you that there's a reality that has to be dealt with even in the homes, because the parents who naturally should be coming out to help their kids are not doing it. So that gives us a problem, something that we need to focus on. And so we're trying to make an effort to make a difference and work in that regards too on local level.
My last question is about the upcoming presidential election. Are we excited about Hillary? Are the Democrats going to put their full energy behind her? And what can we do as a community to support a candidate that does address and pays attention to all the issues we talked about today?
I am very excited about Hillary. I think that we need to make sure that we get behind her 100%. And what is that? Why do I say that? It's based upon she was a fantastic senator. Those of us in New York know that what a tremendous job she did as a member of the United States Senate on our behalf. I can tell you that folks thought that based upon the fact that she was the first lady at one point, et cetera, that she would come in and be a show horse and not a workhorse. Mm-hmm. She showed that she was a workhorse. She was involved in every level on local issues, many of the issues that we discussed today. If you look at her history, she had been involved with them throughout her lifetime, even before she was the first lady, even when she was the first lady, either is the first lady in Arkansas or the first lady of the United States. It's been part of her life's work, so that you know that she's not going to change now. You look at some of the work and dedication of the Clinton Foundation, and you can look up at some of the makeup of the administration in Bill Clinton's presidency. I think we've got real reason to believe that she would be a fantastic president and would deal with the issues that are important to us. We saw how hard she worked as Secretary of State. And so I look forward to working with her. I'm very pleased that she's going to open her office in Brooklyn, New York. Yes, I heard. And so that's very exciting also. And so to all my friends from Brooklyn and the borough president, who's a good friend of mine, Eric Adams, and my good friend, I know you've interviewed Hakeem Jeffries. I know that they are very excited about Brooklyn. But we'll say that we're part of the same peninsula as Brooklyn here in Queens and Long Island. So I would urge individuals, and it's what we've been talking about, Charles, getting involved in the same way. If folks had not gotten involved with Barack Obama in 2008, he would not be the president today. And elections do make a difference. And so we have a chance to continue making history in the United States by first, we've elected an African American, the first one, and now electing the first woman to be president of the United States, in Hillary Clinton.
My favorite principle in the book is everybody matters, and everyone has to do their part, that there is no room for people not to contribute. So I'm really glad that you've taken the opportunity to talk to us and contribute your value to our lives.
Thank you. Great being with you.
Thank you,
man. All right, now.
Thank you.